Very important week for all of us, and we want to kick off this week of infertility awareness by talking about something that is very dear to me, and that is not really discussed much with your infertility doctors, me included. I'm sort of wearing my other hat for this evening at my prior experience. If there's anybody online who's one of my patients, they may or may not know that I was trained as a clinical psychologist before going to medical school. So the other side of the infertility piece, the emotional side, which is equally important, is not something we attend to enough. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time this evening to talk about how infertility really affects us in the social milieu, and talk about kind of the scenarios that people often encounter, and maybe some thoughts about how to deal with it. I thought, since there were a lot of people on this webinar, that I would go through some slides just to talk about some main points that I want to share with you this evening, but also to give a chance for people to talk. Once I'm done with the slides, that I'm hoping that's going to bring up some thoughts, some resonance in finding things that you can relate to, and may have experienced yourself or may have heard of, and see what thoughts or feelings or suggestions you may have that you want to share with us this evening. So let me start very simply by by starting with a very simple point, which is, what does fertility mean to most people? Fertility is something that is important to most people, not everyone, of course, but most of us understand the desire for fertility. Why is it so important? It could be for different reasons. For some of us, has to do with the idea of continuing one's genetic heritage, one's gene pool that somebody may be proud of or want to bring on to the next generation. For other people is the desire to nurture, the desire to have their own young that they can nurture and watch develop into full adults and share their life from generation to generation. Linda Hopgogar, who's a psychologist, said, for most women and men, the ability to conceive and give birth to a child is the meaning of life. Bearing children, empowerment to their lifelong notions of femininity and masculinity, to gender identity, and ultimately parenting reflects Erik Erikson's concept of generativity. What she's talking about here is an innate desire to really bring a certain meaning to one's life. That's not to say that you can have meaning without it, but it enhances whatever meaning or belief you have that your life is supposed to be, or you would like your life to be. So as you could see, not that you didn't know this, but this puts words to a lot of our thoughts and feelings about this. This is a very deeply rooted desire, deeply rooted instinct that as human beings we share, and we should be able to understand with one another. So it is not surprising, given this, that when fertility or the possibility of fertility is threatened, that somebody is going to enter in what's called a life crisis. It's a true life crisis. And not surprisingly, as a result of that, the risk of depression, anxiety, distress is going to be high for all patients who struggle with infertility. Feeling of sadness, frustration, isolation, guilt, blame, loss of control, you name it, a patient who's going through infertility will have experienced it. And this applies not just to women, but to men as well. Although men cope with this sort of experience in a different way, and that's for a whole other webinar, truly as human beings, we're all equally affected, even if it manifests itself in different ways. So one question somebody may have is, well, how do I find comfort? Where do we look for comfort during difficult times in our life? Well, do we look inside ourselves, reach towards our inner strength, or even try to find our own inner strength? Or do we look to our friends? Do we look to our family? Do we find strength perhaps from them? Or do we reach out to strangers, to people that we're not close to, but who are walking on a similar path to ours and maybe become close to us through the similarity of their journey? Do we reach out to professionals, to people who we call experts? Or is it really all of the above? Well, one thing we know for sure, and that is that we are social beings. So when we struggle in life with whatever it is that we are experiencing, we tend to reach out to others. We look for others for support, for comfort, for camaraderie, for teaching, for guidance. All of these things is part of being a human being. We do not, as humans, want to be alone and isolated. So you can imagine then, given that, how difficult it becomes when the social milieu can itself become, rather than a source of support, a source of conflict, let me speak English, of conflict, right? Conflict, disapproval, stress. And so how do you manage that? How can you find a way to handle a social situation which could have been fun or normal or socially acceptable or pleasant to begin with, and now is no longer feeling that way? You may remember yourself or think of yourself as a fun person who likes to go out, who likes to be social, and now you may find yourself not in the mood to go out and be social and superficial and talk about things that don't matter to you at all. Or you may not be in the mood to answer a question about things that truly matter to you, such as the experience that you're going through. The idea of going out then is just going to become unpleasant and stressful, something that you don't look forward to. You may want to go out and you may want to go out and forget, but you can't. And if you can, you are so scared that anything can happen in a social gathering that may set you off, right? A sensitive question or an insensitive remark, or a happy couple that are pregnant, or a woman who walks in with her child. Anything can set you off, and anything may make you feel more vulnerable and frail that you more than you already feel at the moment. So why are social gatherings so difficult? Why are social situations that used to be easy and pleasant now become more stressful? Well, part of it is coming from within, right? Part of it may come from a sense of somebody running into you and thinking that perhaps you're pregnant. And you may just had a loss, or you may just feel really bloated from all the medications that you're taking, and they may make a comment to you being pregnant, or congratulations, which of course is going to be nothing but a painful remark. Or you may see people around you that are younger than you, who are pregnant or just had a kid, and you may ask yourself and bring yourself into that horrible thinking mode, which I always tell my patients to stay away from, which is, why did I wait so long? What was I doing? What was I thinking? Why did I do that? Why did I have that termination years ago when I was pregnant? I was too young and I thought I'll get pregnant some other time. Or why did I not decide to have kids and instead I went and tried to have a career? All the sort of thinking that is going to always spiral down towards negativity. And sometimes, even if you're not in that place before you go into a social gathering, certain events will bring you there. So that's part of the problem. So part of the issue is what may be provoked within you when you are in a social situation. But the other part of it, which is certainly also a big piece of the puzzle, is you may be getting some questions. You may be getting some questions from people that you don't want to answer. And you may be having to answer or feel pushed to answer questions that you don't want to answer, or you may just be approached in a way that's insensitive or inappropriate. So let's talk about for a second, which is what I wanted to do a little bit, talk about some of the questions and some of the idea of how to tackle them. But before we even get there, one thing to always start from before you even think about how am I going to approach this family reunion that I have to go to? How am I going to approach to this party that we have to go, my husband and I, or my partner and I, or just myself, whatever the case may be. There's one thing that's important to remember, and that is, number one, there is not one way. There's not one perfect way to tackle a party or social event, just like there's no one way to grieve a loss. There is one point, and most important point, to always keep in mind before handling anyone else in your life, and that is, you're in pain. There's a level of suffering that you're going through. It doesn't have to be a physical pain that's tangible, as it is in people who have more obvious or tangible physical illness. The pain is coming a lot from inside, but it's real. And it could be the pain of you just haven't gotten pregnant yet, treatment after treatment, or you got pregnant and then you had a loss, or you got pregnant and then it was ectopic, or the numbers went up and then they were down, or there was actually a pregnancy and then it didn't continue. All of these emotions, or simply you had another period that shows up when you were hoping not to have it, and you had another negative pregnancy that the nurse just called you with the news, unfortunately, I'm sorry to tell you, you're not pregnant, right? All of these are going to bring up a certain amount of pain and sadness and suffering that is real, it is normal, and it is human. So there are no suggestions that anybody out there can give you that could ever take that pain away. The suggestion, pardon me, may help you understand why you're experiencing pain. The suggestions may help you figure out how to cope with them, but in no way can any of those suggestions that anybody can give you take the pain away. So the point you start from is acknowledging that pain is real, that you're normal and healthy for feeling it. And the acknowledgement of the pain is the step one. Once you know and you can acknowledge it, and you can share that with somebody if you want to, that's a whole other story, but you start from yourself acknowledging it and acknowledging that you're entitled to that pain. Not just that you're entitled, but it is normal for you to have it. If you didn't, it wouldn't be healthy. It wouldn't be normal, right? Because you would be too disconnected from it. And that's not good either. So starting from that point, then what? Well, you get to family gatherings, right? You get people to come together. Many people who ask about when you're going to have kids, they're just trying to get information, right? They're just trying to make conversation. They see it as something equivalent to, hey, how's your job going? How's the weather been? How's any part of your life going, right? So they'll ask about what's happening with having kids. But they also, there may be some self-centered reasons why family members may ask you a question. And when I mean self-centered, not that they have some major ulterior motive in place, but simply, your mom may just want to know, gee, when do I get to see a grandchild? Your sister may want to know if they get to be an aunt soon, or if they have a child, if they have, a sibling or a cousin that their child can play with. So they may be coming from those places that are not bad places. They're not mean places, but they're just well-intended. They're maybe coming from a point of concern and caring, but unfortunately, they are, without any awareness of that, they may be insensitive. And oftentimes, when family or friends ask us, "How can we help?" How can we help our sister or cousin? That's one of the first things we explain to them, is give them their space and don't put the pressure that just by asking a question you are putting on them. But the point is, oftentimes, if not most of the time, they come from a good place. And sometime when you're suffering, you may lose track of that. But even if they come from a good place, there's an important thing that you have to remember, and that is, you don't really owe anybody an explanation. You don't, let me be clear. If it feels right to give an explanation, if it feels right to give some sort of explanation, understanding, or it's some degree of information, then it's fine. But most of the time, it doesn't. And most of the time, you may feel like you just need that space. And it's okay to say, I don't know when we're going to have kids. I'm not sure. And just walk away from the situation. So you can give answers if it feels right to do so, but it is also equally perfectly acceptable to not give answer if it doesn't feel right. And that is, something that only your partner, if you have a partner, can sort of see what may feel or not feel right to you. You may also just change the subject and just say, you move on to something else, or let's talk about something else. Most of the time people get it, that you don't want to talk about it. Sometimes people are a little thick-headed and you have to be a little bit more clear, and so be it. But the most important thing in this is that, especially when it comes to women, we tend to feel always like we have to give an explanation. We feel tempted to blur something out. Oh no, we've been trying very hard. Thank you very much. But there are problems, or feel like we have to give some sort of a quick answer, and feel like we're in a corner because we want to be courteous and we want to be respectful and we don't want to be rude. But there are ways in which you can say, like, this is difficult for me to talk about, or, I don't know what's going on yet. We'll let you know, without being rude, even if it's a family member, even if it's somebody that you feel a certain degree of respect and you don't want to offend. But let me move here. The biggest part, and I see here that this is turned a little bit, the biggest part in the biggest question, or the question of all questions, or the question that's behind any of the questions that people ask, is, so when are you going to start a family? And that is always a painful question to hear, especially if it comes from somebody that you love, you care for, and you care about what they think. With infertility, everyone on this call, including myself, knows that wanting to have kids and trying as hard as you can to have them comes with no guarantee of success, no matter what you do. So this kind of question, like, when are you doing it, is a question that reminds you of one of the most difficult things about infertility, which is the lack of control. And this question, even though it seems so benign from the person who's asking it, is so painful, because what it implies is that you are choosing not to have kids. Like, so when are you going to decide? Like, this is not a question of deciding, right? This is a question of when is this going to happen, whether this is going to happen, right? So these are very big points of pain, of suffering, of fear, of anxiety, of stress, and sometimes even discordance between a couple, because they're coping in different ways. One person may want to cope by not thinking about it and just like, oh, let's just try on our own. The other one was like, no, we have to do this, and that. And they may be at different points in terms of their readiness for treatment. And the doctor may be telling you one thing and you may be reacting in different ways. So this is obviously a very, very sensitive topic and a very sensitive point in the whole journey of infertility. So this implication that it's up to you, and that if it's not happening, it's because you're choosing it not to happen, is obviously where there's a crux of a lot of the misunderstanding between individuals who are going through the infertility process and those who are on the outside, not understanding, not appreciating the struggle. But the point to also keep in mind is that when and whether this child or these children will happen is nobody's business. So it's not just a question of, it's not something you know that when it will happen. It's also not necessarily really something that you need to be discussing with everybody else. So when a question like this happens, you don't need to feel cornered and have to give an answer. You take a deep breath and you think about whether you want to have a conversation about this with this individual or not. At the moment, it could just simply be a smile and a walk away if you're like, you know what, this is not one of the individuals I want to have this conversation with. Or it may be taking a deep breath and think about, how am I going to explain this? How do I want to approach this, right? So how to do that depends a little bit on who's asking. One of the things that you want to think about when you go into social gathering is prepare yourself ahead of time. Where are you going? Who are you going to be seeing? Who do you want to talk about this with, and who you don't want to talk about this with? And have that sort of prepared ahead of time, so that you don't feel at the last minute when you're feeling pressure, you have to decide, do I say something? Do I not say something? You'll have a pretty clear mental picture of who you think is a person in your life that you want to share this with. It may be 2 people, it may be 3, 4, 10, none. But go in prepared before you go to this gathering, because once you're there, you're going to feel the pressure to come up with answers. So preparing yourself with your partner on how you want to handle it, including sometimes if having your partner be the one who answers and you're just like, I'm just getting out of this one, that's fine too. And as long as there's sort of agreement, some sort of plan. So like anything else in life, if you go prepared, you could handle it with less stress. So consider who's asking. Come up with a few good lines that will keep everyone happy. Things like, oh, when it happens, it happens. Make it light. That's a great question. I'm not sure. Add some humor. How's your baby? How's your planning going? Make a joke. Humor sometimes is a good way to approach it, but not always. Depends on the situation, right? So that's why the planning is something that it becomes particularly helpful. Be prepared. Biggest thing. People want to give you their advice. They want to tell you about their experience. We went on vacation. We were just relaxing. We were fine. And everything just happened. People will always want to give an anecdote or two about what happened to them. And you may want to hear it. You may not, depending on the situation. Again, it's the same thing. You decide what you're prepared to handle. You decide whether you want to hear the anecdote, or you could just stop it right there. Thank you for sharing this with me. I think it's a little bit more than I want to hear right now, but I appreciate you trying to help me. And you end it. Most people, unless they're really, really dense, are able to pick up on these kind of nuances in social situations. So we should be able to pass the moment of, I'm going to ask you more questions, and you're going to be able to have somebody who say, okay, I think I'm going to stop. She's obviously giving me a signal that it's too much. If you can't hold back, there also, as I was mentioning before, some humorous answers. You'll be the first to know if I'm pregnant. Why? Do I look pregnant? Oh my God, you think I'm that fat? Oh no, it's just the hormones. I'm not pregnant. How's your sex life going? All sorts of funny remarks that will get somebody to laugh and get distracted and move on to something else. As I said, most people will get the hint and move on to a different topic. If they don't, then you have to be more direct. Now, other possible answers when you don't want to use humor or other things, you could say, we consider ourselves a family right now. We love children and especially enjoy our nieces and nephews and friends' kids, so we're very happy the way we are right now. If we decide to expand our family, we'll be sure to let you know. These are just common, polite, respectful answers that you can give, but letting people know that enough was asked and you need to go to something else. With that, like I said, you obviously don't want to offend people, but you also have to stand your ground. Nothing wrong with saying, this is what I need and this is what I expect in terms of a social situation, a social interaction. You would do it for anything else. You would answer questions appropriately for anything else, and you express your opinion about everything else. When it comes to this, you don't have to feel different. You're still entitled to express your opinion and to determine what is okay and not okay to talk about. So, sometimes you'll get your parents to come up with a comment such as, oh, well, I guess we'll never get to be grandparents, right? That's a particularly painful one because it's your parents. It could be your in-laws or your own parents. And then you can say things that are soft, that are loving, that are caring, but also suggesting that is you have in common one thing is you have the same wish, just like they want to be grandparents, you want to be parents. Things like, we truly hope that someday you will have grandchildren. Whether we have children biologically or through another way, we look forward to sharing our happiness with you. For those who are in the process of considering a donor egg, they're going to be parents too. And so you want to emphasize to parents who sometimes just don't know that there's different ways in which you can be parents. And one way or another, we have the same goal, we have the same aspiration, and we hope to be able to get there. So you're gently saying that you want the same thing, but you're also saying, we will let you know when it happens. We are hoping for the same goal and the same results that you're hoping for. There could also be some snarky remark, and often you get these from, if it's somebody, you have family members who didn't get a career, who stayed at home, and they may have 2, 3, 4, whatever number of children. And they're like, of course, they have to put in their 2 cents about, you're always so busy. You can imagine that is not something that is unfamiliar to me, coming from Italian family as a physician. You can imagine how many people made comments about me wanting to be a doctor. So this one's particularly hit home for me. When you're going to stop concentrating on your career and start a family? I started hearing that since I was 20. So I'd be perfectly comfortable saying, I don't believe my job and my family are mutually exclusive. I'm very proud of my work. Women can have it all. It's a little complicated, they can, but it comes at a price. But regardless, women don't have to sacrifice career in order to have a family, and vice versa. When we feel the time is right, we will consider starting our family. It's no matter what your family background, no matter what your ethnic background, no matter what your religious background, it's between you, yourself, your partner. And those are the individuals that have something to say about when, if, how to start a family, and no one else. And that is something you have to always be mindful of and ever feel guilty about it. So comments you may hear in addition to what we said, and I made a reference to this a minute ago. Oh, you just need to relax. Oh, just stop obsessing about this and you'll be just fine. Or you can even adopt, right? People always have made comments like that. Well, your response to that could always be, well, you know what? We're working with fertility experts. We're working with professionals. So we need to concentrate on what they're telling us to do, not you. I appreciate your advice, but I need to focus on their advice. Adoption, wonderful choice, but that's between me and my partner. That's not for anybody else to discuss. If you would really help me, it would really help me if you could listen without giving advice. Teach people to listen. If you want to know what's going on with me, then listen. If I want to know what your opinion is, I will ask you. It doesn't come as an automatic follow through. From the listening comes the advice. And it's helpful for you to process that, to have a chance to explain and talk to people. Put it that way. To me, it's just helpful to process and just be able to talk to you. But I'm not ready to listen to advice. That's why I have my doctor for. That's why I have my team for. And I'm going to follow them for this point, at this point in my life. So these are common ways that you can, I don't want to be rude and say shut people up, but you can sort of get people to move away from insisting on asking more questions or telling you what to do or the right way to do it. You may also hear, gee, IVF is not natural. It's all medicine. It's in the lab, test tube babies, the whole thing. And maybe some people are just not meant to be pregnant. Maybe some people are just not meant to be parents. Now, I wish I could be with you if somebody said that to you, because I'd have a whole slew of responses to give, but I'm gonna give you some suggestions. The craziest thing to me is somebody said, a psychologist said, the diagnosis of infertility is like a diagnosis of cancer, just as devastating, just as horrible. Of course, one is not life-threatening, which is a huge difference, but it is threatening to your sense of well-being. It is threatening to your sense of who you are, right? And that's equally important. You're not going to die from infertility, but your soul may, your spirit may, and that's also important. So without minimizing the seriousness of a cancer diagnosis, of course, we have to also understand that human beings are both physical and emotional beings, right? So one thing that people forget, and maybe, or if they don't forget it, they just don't understand it, is that infertility is a medical condition. It is a diagnosis. It's not just, today I want to change my hair to from red to blue. Oh, today I want to be a parent. It's not the same. People don't choose to be infertile. People are infertile. And if somebody gets diagnosed with diabetes, with cancer, nobody seems to have a problem with going through medication. If somebody has osteoporosis and they need a hip replacement, nobody seems to have a problem with the fact that they put metal in their body. Is that natural? No. Are medications natural? No. None of this thing is natural. What's natural is that the human condition is not perfect and the body is not perfect. And when the body is not perfect, we use medicine to help us improve. If we have a cancer diagnosis, we'll take chemotherapy. Is chemotherapy natural? No. If you are infertile, you're going to go get treated. You'll try to have some form of treatment so that you can become fertile. Where is the unnatural piece here? It's medicine. We are human beings. So obviously we can't create things. Only somebody up from above can create. We don't. We just facilitate a process that occurs naturally. I always explain to my patient, this isn't Star Wars. This isn't science fiction. We're not doing funky things. We are going to take your egg, we're going to take your sperm, and then nature will do its thing. All we're doing is aiding nature. That's all we can do, which is why I can't guarantee you that it's going to work. I guarantee you we will put everything in place that medicine has to try and get you to your goal. Most of the times we are successful, sometimes we're not. Why? Because it's medicine. It's not anything above what nature can do. We can not change nature, we can only enhance it. And that is why it is part of nature. So in that sense, it's absolutely natural. Nobody knows what we're meant to be. And nobody has the right to tell somebody else what they're meant to be. No way. Nobody who's a human being can tell another human being what they're meant to be. So don't ever fall into that trap, whether it's political, religious, medical, whatever, social, cultural. Don't fall into the trap of having somebody else tell you what you're meant to be, because no one should or ever can tell you that. If you have a baby, it's a blessing. Things we do, at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen. And if it happens, it's a blessing. And if you have a baby, that baby is a baby. It's your baby, no matter how you got your baby. And no one could ever take that away from you or make that baby any less than if you were having intercourse in your house. It's the same thing. It's still your baby. And that's all that matters. How you get to it is between you, your partner, your doctor, and no one else's business, unless you want to share it with them. So obviously I feel a little passionate about this one, but it's important. It's important that people are not ignorant, and a lot of questions, a lot of concerns, like everything else in life, often comes from ignorance. So other situation you may encounter, well, you may encounter a situation where you run into people who are pregnant, announcing that they're pregnant, and they invite you to their baby shower, right? Come to our baby shower. We want to celebrate. This is somebody you care. It could be your sister, your cousin, your friend, whoever. Now, this isn't about not being happy for them. Of course you're happy. Somebody you care about, you're going to be happy. But it is painful only because, not because you're a bad person, not because you're not a caring person, but only because it confronts you with the sadness and the loss and the pain you're feeling inside. So you can say, I'm so happy for you. But at the moment, it's very painful for me to see other people getting pregnant while I'm struggling so much. I'm so conflicted. I just need to have a little space for myself. Thank you so much for understanding. I feel nothing but joy for you. And it's always important to remind people that that is what you feel for them, because you don't want people to think you're not happy for them. So let's talk about for a second about the feelings, right? Because there's a lot of feelings in all the things we've talked about. You're going to have a feeling of mixed blessing, right? You want to share happy, fun moments. You want to go out to a party or a get together or a family event. You want to be part of it because you're happy and you want to share that with family and friends that you love. But there could be either kids there, or there could be conversations about kids, because that's what happened. Hey, how is so-and-so? How are you doing? How is your kid? How is your other kid? How is the how is somebody's family, how they're doing with their kids, and oh, do they have a kid yet? Do they have a kid yet? It's always a topic of conversation, right? Or your kid going to elementary school or high school or junior high or wherever their kids may be, right? So you want to be filled with joy. You want to share the happiness in other people's life, but you also have this painful longing that you're struggling with, right? And it's always important. Don't forget about your hope. Don't get tied down in the sadness and these bad feelings that you lose track of your hope. So if this events sometimes could bring you away from the feeling of hope, then are events that you need to stay away from. But how do you beat the blues? How do you beat the sadness? You don't want to be sad all the time. Certainly not. The first thing you do is you let go of feeling of guilt. And I mentioned to you the issue of guilt. If you feel bad for somebody, if you feel bad for yourself and you can't enjoy happy moments for somebody else, that there's nothing to feel guilty about. That is part of human nature. We're all the same, whatever the situation may be. When we're confronted and we have to visualize right in front of us, visualize what's missing in our life, that's going to bring on pain. It's going to bring up sadness. It's inevitable. If you don't feel like being the life of a party and participating in a family gathering, you don't have to. If you don't want to attend a party, a concert, a wine tasting event when you can't drink, it's okay. And that's a lot about what I mean when I say don't feel guilt. If you're not up for it, you're not up for it. Don't feel the obligation. Try express where you're at to those who love you, and they should be able to understand. What else is coming around the corner? That's another painful thing for all of us here is Mother's Day is right around the corner, right? Mother's Day, the most beautiful day for those who are mother, for your mothers, for your sisters who are mothers, and for you, because you are somebody who's longing to be a mother. You may already be a mother or longing to have another child. You may have been a mother for a day. You may have been a mother for a week, a month, 3 months, or even 9 months and then lost your child. You're still a mother. You may have had a positive pregnancy test and the next day it was negative. You're still a mother. You are hanging on to the desire to have a child that makes you a mother to be, and a mother who's longing to be one. That is just equally important. But for you, this day brings up pain. There are mothers all over the world that lost their children. They lost their children as adults. For them, this day brings up pain. So Mother's Day is a very complicated, emotionally laden day, full of lots of joy, lots of sadness, but certainly most of all, lots of intensity. Practice self-love, practice self-compassion. Make sure on this day you're not alone, that you're with somebody that you love and somebody who loves you. While you love your mother and your mother's around, they're part of your life. This is really a difficult day, as I just said. This day is about you and the dream that you're trying to manifest, but that still hasn't manifested itself. So it's a day to remind you to stay strong. It's a day to remind you, and that's the way I want you to think of this day, that you're not alone. There's a lot of longing mothers to be who are there with you in this journey. Try to remember that as well as remembering, trying to be there for your mother and those who you love that are mothers themselves. But most important, and I'm sure that any good mother would understand and agree with me when I said, take care of yourself on that kind of day, because it's the most important thing you can do for your mother that loves you. Take especially good care of yourself during this time. Treat yourself, exercise, yoga, spa, rest, good food. Any of these things are good things to do for yourself. But, moderation. I always tell my patient, don't drink alcohol. If on one day you had a glass of wine, don't beat yourself up. Move on to the next day. You'll be fine. Moderation, quality of life, common sense. These are things that apply to these kind of times. The stress of social event. Avoid no stressor from prior gathering. If you know that getting to this family event is only going to be upsetting, don't set yourself up to experience it again. Say no if you have to. Decline situation or gatherings that you know are going to be painful. If you're not ready to go into a baby shower, don't go. Your friend, your family member that loves you will understand. You can say, I don't think I'm up to attending your party. Please don't take it personally. I hope you can understand, and please keep inviting me. That will help me so much. Your love is what's important to me. I will be there. I just can't be there now. Ask for support. That's the other piece of it. Find the friends who can be there for you. Find the friends and family members who can be of support to you, but tell them how to help you. Just like friends don't, or family don't necessarily understand the medical piece of it, they also don't understand the emotional piece of it. They may need to hear from you. You know what? It's really important. If you just don't ask me until I give you some updates, that would really help me. You know what? If you just, on Mother's Day or on my birthday, if we just go see a movie, go shopping, go do something else, and we don't talk about what I'm going through, that would really, really help me. Or if you just want to ask, you could just say, you know what, if you want, you could say, I'm here if you want to talk, and leave it at that. Tell them things like that so they know how to behave, they know how to act with you. There's also fertility groups. The people I know already know there's so many online resources. There's professional. We have here at RMA, there's social workers that are always available to patients, the patient navigators who, for example, our patient navigator in Inglewood always helps me with all the patients who are going through a pregnancy loss. She's wonderful. She can talk to them. She can give them resources. This is what we do. This is how we set you up for success. One of the hardest things about the infertility journey is sticking through it and not giving up and leaving because I can't handle this is too much for me. We want you to hang in there, and we try to provide to you whatever resources are available to you. We're not perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes we even miss the boat. Sometimes we don't see if a patient is struggling, and then they'll tell me, by the way, I felt so alone, and I'm like, thank you so much for telling me this. I didn't know. And sometimes we don't see things because we're human beings. We're not perfect. So speak up. Tell us where you are. Tell the people you love where you are at, because they may want to help you much more than you even think. Sometimes the people that you're close to, the family, as I was mentioning a second ago, family, friends, parents, sometimes being direct on things that you need is really the best way to handle it. Let them know it's not their fault if they don't know how to help you, just like it's not your fault if you don't know how to be supported or how to get help from them. It's about teaching each other and helping each other. You can say, I find it hard when the conversation is always about grandkids. Express that to them so they can understand. Consider alternative plans. So let's say, for example, your friends are getting all together for a shower, baby shower, or some party celebrating your niece's 2-year-old birthday. Well, you may choose to do something different that day. You can send them a gift. You can tell them you love them. You can go see your niece or whatever on a different day. And on that particular day, when everybody else is getting together, you may do something different. You can go camping. You can go on vacation. You can go out to dinner with friends in similar situation that don't have children. You may join your parents for dinner after the gathering, or you may join your sister and her child after the gathering. I don't think the child's going to care on which day you go. Plan at least one day a week or twice a month. Do an activity you really love. Continue living. That's the other piece, right? Don't forget that you can do things and be social in situations where it's safer and where it feels more comfortable. Create rituals of your own during this time. I mentioned the spa, the shopping, the movie binging, the retreat, the bowling, whatever makes you happy, whatever whatever is something that makes you feel good. Those are the kind of things you should do. And most importantly, do things that get your mind off of the big I word, the infertility word. Bring you more in the moment of enjoying things. And it may be going to a party that you're afraid to go. Just set the right expectation. Decide how you want to handle it. If you feel it makes you happier to go than not to go, just prepare yourself and protect yourself in whatever way is needed. As I mentioned before, make a date with family members or friends without their kids. You could say, it's really hard for me to be around little ones right now, but I still need to see you. I would mean a lot to me if you can make a lunch date. I hope you can understand. I can't imagine a good friend wouldn't understand that kind of statement. Also, there has to be friends who don't have children, for God's sake. Somebody that doesn't have to come always with their kids' problem, their family problem. Somebody who can relate to you. And if you can't find them in your immediate circle, that's when you start looking on the outside for other people who are going through what you're going through. Consider limiting the time you spend with your family if it is too stressful. Sometimes it's just too stressful no matter how much you try. You're the best judge of that. Let them know they did not do anything to make you feel that way, but just that is what you need at this time. Ultimately, make sure you don't give up events that are meaningful or joyful to you, and that's important. Do not let infertility rob you of the joys that are important to you. And as I mentioned, don't stop living. Try to keep life going because it's important to feel normal as a normal human being. To quote Leonard Cohen, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be sad because it's the only way that life light can get in. It's part of life to be sad, and it's only when you feel the sadness that you can appreciate the joy. It's normal. We all go through it for one reason or another. Ultimately, for us, it's important that you hang in there with us. One of the things I always say to my patient, it's really easy to be your doctor when all goes well and everything is perfect and we're all happy and there goes your positive pregnancy test and everything worked out well. It's much harder when things don't go the right way. Part of it is it's painful for me, for my colleagues, because we're your doctors and we want to see you happy. It's painful for you because you're hurt, you're disappointed, you're scared. Is this ever going to happen? And so sometimes it's really hard to hang in there and not give up. And so what's one of the hardest thing is to not give up. Patients will say to me, gee, Dr. Costantini, thank you so much for, talking to us. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's like, there's no thank you here. I'm in the trenches with you is what I always say to my patients. We're in this battle. We're in this battle together. When you go down, I go down with you. And when you're happy, I'm happy. When you're sad, I'm sad. And I know I'm not the one experiencing it directly, but as a human being, as a person, as a doctor, as a mother, I understand. And I'm committed, and we all are, to see you get to your goal. But it comes with ups and downs, and the downs are really down and the ups are up. But when you get through those downs, it's important not to get off the battle and stay engaged, stay with us, because ultimately, most of the time we get there. It just sometimes it's much harder than others. And we're there with you every step of the way. And that's a promise from all of us here. So thank you for listening to this. I wanted to take now a few minutes. I don't know how many people are on. I'm sure I must have spurred some thoughts. I'm sure people could relate to some of the scenarios I gave, because those scenarios come from patients and things that they've said. So want to see, what people want to share.
So I have seen a couple questions come in.
Okay.
I have one. How do I respect my husband's wish to keep our IVF journey a secret, but I want a small group of family or friends to talk to about it?
I think this is called compromise. As many aspects in a marriage, in a relationship, it entails some degree of sort of meeting halfway. I think finding a small group of individuals that you can both be comfortable with is key. This is a very common question I've had. I could tell you some of my patients, or a couple at least, we had agreed, this had come up in conversation. And so we had said, well, maybe we keep family off the table. I don't want your sister to know. I don't want my brother to know. I don't want your mother to know. I think it depends on what your need is. If your mother is your best friend, if your sister is your best friend, it's hard to agree to that compromise. But if you have a couple good friends, people you trust, people who won't talk to other people, and all of a sudden your whole friend group knows, then maybe you can reassure your husband, like, look, it's only going to be these two people. It's important for me. It helps me get through this. If I can get through this, then we can do better in getting through this together. Then maybe he'll feel less threatened. Because ultimately, for women, infertility is like, okay, I have a problem, tell me how to deal with it, let's get on with it, let's fix it. For men, it's like, that's not my problem, that's got to be her problem. It's an attack to their masculinity, right? For women, we don't care. It's like, yeah, okay, so I have problems, but we as women are more focused on what we need to do to fix it. Men are very stuck in that feeling of, does this make me less of a man? Which of course it doesn't. but that's how it's perceived. So the last thing they want is for people to find out. So if you can in any way reassure him, number one, that that's not how you see him. Number two, that the person, the people, the individuals that you want to share with, they're feeling our pain, they're sharing our pain, they love us both, they think we're wonderful, and they want nothing else but to see us parents, to alleviate, to kind of explain and alleviate some of his concern, may get him to agree to a few people to share it with.
So another question that we have in here is, let's see, how do you tell your family and friends that you aren't able to have children?
In terms of like a definitive thing, I'm assuming this person is asking, like, if you tried everything and it's not happening, and you've tried even all avenue, you're closing the book to the fertility journey. Is that what they're asking?
That's my understanding, I think.
Okay. Well, that's one that I always try. I always try to work on my patients not to get to that point. I always try to come up with ways in which we can achieve parenthood, one form or another. But if there is such a situation in which you have used all your resources, and certainly I can think of times when that has happened, I think it depends on the relationship you have with your family. Certainly, this would not be like a blank announcement. I would pick maybe one or two people, maybe my parents, maybe my siblings, to share it with and explain, we've tried, we've given it everything we've got, and we just simply can't handle the stress of the journey anymore. That has led to nothing that we wanted, and share with them the sadness, but the fact that you're going to build the family that you have with the two of you, that you're counting on their love and their support. And if you need something from them, you ask. If you just need for them to give you time to process it, then you say it. But wherever you're at, is there a name in this, Vanessa? I can't see it.
So some of these are submitted, anonymously.
Okay. I was going to ask, I was just wanting to see like a first name, but wherever, whoever it is that wrote this, it makes me sad to hear you ask this question, but I think, you start from the closest people in your family, and you may even ask them, how do you think we should tell everybody? Can you help me? Or can you tell the rest of the family? It's a little bit hard for me, and really get their support and their help on how to manage it. But start by telling them what it is that you need. And so that they can help you, just like you would go to them if you had a medical illness and you wanted to share a diagnosis, and ask them, can you help me tell the others? Because it's a hard thing for you to share. And they may be able to be the ones to tell you, and then you don't have to talk about it with everybody. But certainly I don't think you have to go one by one and tell every single person. That's why you have friends, and that's why you have family to help you with it.
So another question is, let's see, if you RSVP for baby shower and your transfer's a week later, you're not sure how you'll feel at the end of the month for this baby, and then you realize you don't really want to go, but it's your baby nephew coming into the world. What do you say to the person? How do you explain that you don't think you'll be able to make it?
So if you're not feeling well, a lot of this depends on the closeness you have with the person, right? If you're already RSVP and your transfer is going to be a week after the shower, that I understand that correctly?
That's the way I'm reading it.
Okay. So here's my thought. Okay. And this depends on the situation. If you think that, it's hard to imagine, there's different possible scenarios, right? You can go to the baby shower, and that's going to stress the heck out of you and make you feel like, oh my God, I hope this works. I hope this works. Forget it. Don't go. If you're my patient and I know you're about to undertake some sort of path that's going to lead to an increased stress a week before your transfer, I'm going to politely ask you not to do it. What to say to your friend? I'm not feeling well. I'm so sorry. You may want to share. what's happening. Let's say you didn't share. Let's say for a second you didn't share. And then you simply, I'm so sorry. I don't feel, even if it's your niece and nephew, I'm so sorry. Well, if it's your niece or nephew that's coming into the world, I may want to suggest to tell them, you know, if they may know, I'm going to have a transfer and it's best for me not to come. My doctor wants me to just lay low for this week. And while I'm excited, I would be excited to come. I think it would be a source of stress. So my doctor wants to keep that cortisol level down. End of story. Now, if on the other hand, you go and you feel excited and hopeful, we always joke about, you know, getting baby powder by any pregnant woman that you see around you, then it may make you feel good to go. So I think the first thing to ask yourself is, how do I feel about going? What does this person know that I'm going through? And if I feel good about going, you should absolutely go. If you don't feel good about going, you know the individual, your relationship, you may ask your partner, your mother, how should I handle it? You know, it could be your sister-in-law. It's like, Mom, how should I handle it? I think it's too stressful for me to go. I have so many patients who are in those kind of scenarios, and their sister-in-law or brother-in-law or whatever is like, do what you need to do. Take care of yourself. The baby shower is not a necessity for you to be here. And don't make it bigger than it needs to be.
How about any tips for telling your employer that you're starting IVF?
You know, what's funny, a lot of my patients have employers who have gone through it. If you have women employers, they often share that they've gone through it. If they have men employer, they may share that they went through it with their wives. I would, you know, with respecting your privacy and depending on the scenarios, I could tell you that many of my patients share it with their employers, because they may have to call in, you know, at the last minute. She has a retrieval that day, so she has to call in and say, I can't come in. She may have to have a colleague cover for them. And so usually people in their work environment find, you know, a couple of individuals, 2 or 3 individuals who know what's going on, who share their story. I will tell you, there's not going to be any company where there's not a person there who knows about infertility treatment. As you know, it's one of those things that nobody talks about, but everybody can relate to, or many people can relate to, I should say. I shouldn't say everybody. And so you may find a lot more support in sharing the information than not. But of course, you know, it depends on the employer and the individuals that you're dealing with. But most often than not, I hear my patients say, oh no, my boss knows I have to do this. Oh no, they understand. They told me I could do this, as opposed to just looking like you're careless or just missing work or not being dedicated or devoted to your job.
Somebody kind of in that vein, someone else said, how do you recommend handling time off from work for appointments and procedures?
That is not that is a little bit of a more practical strategic question. I think it depends on your job. Everyone handles that differently. A lot of our patients who have to be in early will be the first ones doing morning monitoring to be out there, so they're out by 6:15, 6:30. Other patients will see if they can come in a little bit later. They try and come back later. I think that's something more with your doctor and your nurse. You can sort of strategize as to what's the best way to manage it. I don't think there's a one answer on that one. It's really very much specifically dependent on the job that you do.
When do you think it's the best time to tell your job when you do have a successful pregnancy or the loss of a pregnancy?
With regards to work, it's really similar to what I say always with family. Wait till your first trimester, unless you're sick. unless you're really ill, in which case, obviously, you need to notify them. Basically, you notify them if before your first trimester if you're not feeling well. Other than that, we always recommend trying to wait to your first trimester so that you really know you have a better chance of this pregnancy continuing, and that, if you have to start making plans of maternity leave and all that, you can start putting that into place. In terms of pregnancy loss, that is a similar point. It depends on how you feel. If some people will take a day off and go back to work and be okay, and they use work as a way not to think about what's going on. Some people need time off. I always, when patients ask me, can you write a letter to work? I'll write a letter if they need a day or two off because they're going through a miscarriage. Of course, we can't give people time off per se, but a day or two to even recover what's going on, it's super appropriate. A pregnancy loss is a traumatic event, so I think it's very appropriate to share it with your work environment, whoever your manager is, so that they can understand if you take off from work for a couple of days, that what's happening. It's not just you're, going on a wanted vacation, and you just like you needed to regroup and take care of yourself. So I would certainly be more inclined to say sooner rather than later with the pregnancy loss, because you really do need the support and potentially to be home to recover from like a potential DNC or whatever the case may be.
How about, let's see, how would you respond to a friend who's very ungrateful for her natural pregnancy? For example, this is a friend who's upset that she found out the baby's a boy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. As fertility specialists, we struggle with that as well. There is sometimes when things come easy, there really is a lack of appreciation for the miracle that goes behind it. People just think it happens, and they don't realize how many things need to take place in order for that miracle to actually happen. I don't think you could educate them. You could try, depending on how close. But sometimes a simple thing, I wish I could even be in a position to even think about a gender of a child when I'm so desperately looking to have a child. I think saying something like that is enough to make them realize how, I don't want to judge that concern, but how different of a place they're in compared to you. It's not necessarily your place to punish them and make them feel bad, but it is certainly your right to say, wow, we are such in a different place, you and I. I'm just hoping to have a child, and you have one and don't appreciate the fact that you have one, or worried about the gender, or disappointed about the gender. You don't want to take away from what another person may be feeling, because you don't know what's going through their mind, what's in their heart. So you don't want to take that stance, but you can certainly acknowledge the fact that you cannot relate to that at any level. And then they can decide how far they want to take it. They may feel pretty lousy once you say that. So you made your statement, you made your point, and then they can decide what kind of response they want to give you in return, without being mean or accusatory, but still, trying to sort of balance what they're saying with what they should be saying.
Absolutely. So we have a question from somebody who seems like they're having a little bit of a difficult time with their mom during this journey, as I'm sure happens often. But one person wrote in, "My mom's aware of my journey, but blames my anxiety and stress." So there aren't enough, apparently she's I think a native Spanish speaker, and there aren't a lot of really good resources. Do you have any sort of helpful ways that maybe to like easily explain a person who maybe English isn't their first language, how to approach sort of fertility treatments in general? Kind of a complicated question.
So I will say that most mothers who say, it's your anxiety, it's your stress that is the reason why you're not pregnant. That reflects the thought of many mothers. As mothers, you love your kid, you love your child, and you just keep trying, stop, relax, don't be so anxious, and things will work out. It's sort of trying to minimize what they're going through, but not out of lack of love, but more out of concern and wanting to reassure their child, right? So it may come off very well as, just stop being anxious and you'll be fine. So I think part of it is, and I don't know if it's a Spanish speaking piece. I don't know the specifics of how to help with that. But what I could say is a lot of times what helps is some of what I was referring to before when somebody made a comment about, some people aren't just meant to be pregnant, let's just let it be. It's about explaining infertility as a medical condition. So infertility is not just about anxiety and stress. In fact, that was part of my thesis, the fact that, when you do significant treatment like in vitro fertilization, for example, you overcome all of the stressor, the anxiety, the depression that goes along with the stress with the diagnosis of infertility. So if it were true that was only anxiety, depression, then treatment would overcome it, and therefore everybody would be pregnant. So obviously that's not the case. Infertility is certainly associated with and has as part of its clinical picture anxiety and depression, but it's not that anxiety and depression cause infertility. They're two separate things. So one thing would be to explain to your parents, your mother, that as a medical condition, it is not caused, but it presents itself with those other clinical diagnoses, right? Not to the form of a clinical anxiety disorder, to the form of a major depression, but with anxious and depressive features. So we know that for a fact. So what you can explain to your mother is that there's been studies done, and all the studies have shown that even with treatment, you don't necessarily even able to, while you will overcome the anxiety and depression, you will not necessarily achieve infertility. You will not necessarily achieve fertility if there are other issues that present in the clinical picture. So the point is here, if you have infertility, anxiety and depression is not going to change that. If you are fertile and you have anxiety, depression, you're going to be pregnant, even if you're anxious and depressed. So the bottom line is the treatment need to target the causes of the infertility and not just ignore the infertility and just focus on just go home and be and de-stress. Otherwise, all you would need is a good spa treatment, good massage, good acupuncture, and everybody would be pregnant. And that is not the case. So don't know how to say that in Spanish, unfortunately, but that is really the bottom line, and really zooming in on the fact infertility is a medical diagnosis, like diabetes, like hypertension, because people get that. Oh, diabetes, hypertension, cancer. Oh, you treat those. Does anxiety and depression come with cancer diagnosis? You bet it does. Does stress lead to cancer? A lot of people say it does, but you can have two people both stressed. One's going to get cancer and one's not. Why is that? Because the genetics are different, right? So the emotional state of an individual certainly is going to augment any medical diagnosis, but a medical diagnosis remains a medical diagnosis, and it doesn't change for other reasons, stress or anxiety or anything else going with it.
We do have
I hope that helps.
Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a couple slightly more clinical questions if you're open to that. Such as what role does the BMI play in IVF success?
Okay, so that's a completely different question.
Yeah.
And what's the other one? I'll get to that in a second.
The other one is whether placing multiple embryos helps your chances of conceiving.
Okay, so we're getting away from, but of course I can't help put the other hat on for a second. So, multiple transfers, whether it helps the chances of conceiving. So I'm assuming they're talking about two, hopefully they're not thinking about more than that. And while putting back two embryos may potentially increase the initial chance of pregnancy, it will definitely not increase the chances of delivery, because any multiple gestation is going to be at higher risk of loss, potentially decreased implantation if one's a good embryo, one is not. Embryos don't necessarily cooperate. They may, compete with each other. So these are some of the reasons why we proceed with one pregnancy at a time. We, for many years here at RMA, always used to put back two embryos. But when we've seen the degree of complications that goes along with it, the degree of ultimately losing both pregnancies, if it's two of them or three of them, and ultimately not really benefiting the patient, you have to remember that a lot of the reasons why we used to put back more than embryo in the past was to increase our chances of success, right? Have higher pregnancy rates and therefore report better pregnancy rates across the country. That's not the right way to do this. The right way to do it is to do what's best for the patient and ultimately giving you the best chance of holding a baby in your hands. And that's going to be with one pregnancy at a time. So that's the reason for putting back one embryo at a time, because that's going to give you the best chance of getting there successfully. Now, with regard to BMI, that is a complicated question, and it's a little bit, it's above the scope of this meeting, and one that would require a long conversation. There is some literature suggesting that decreasing BMI is going to give you a better chance of success, not just with infertility treatment, but also because of less degrees of complication, but also less degree of complication of obstetrical complications that go along once a pregnancy is achieved. And that is sort of what's behind the preference for a BMI that's reduced for medical reasons. So if, sort of summarize a little bit in a kind of a brief synopsis of the main point.
We actually had a former patient of yours, or she may actually be a current patient of yours. And so she actually wrote in to say that she has met a lot of really great women in a similar position through the Fertili-Friends group, which is a Facebook group that we sort of partner with. And I know that there is, I think, a 2,000 members at this point who have been there and done that. They are currently in treatment, or they have already completed their fertility journeys. And so that can be an excellent resource no matter what part of the country you are in.
Yes.
Which is fantastic. 24/7 you're going to be able to find some support on that page.
That's wonderful. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure. A couple of people just wrote in while I was mentioning it, and I will respond to those. So we all are on the same page with that. But I think to wrap up, do you have any last comments or recommendations for people who just have bossy family or friends in their lives who just want to know every little thing? When do you start your cycle? When do you end your cycle? Did you take a break in your cycle? How can you just shut it all down?
I think, it's funny. Sometimes things happen in life for a reason. I always joke and I always laugh when I hear that, because I think there's a lot of truth behind that. But, this process that women go through is really an opportunity to establish how we want to handle stress in our life, right? I mean, now it's going to be trying to get pregnant. A lot of my patients who come back for the second child after they struggle for the first one will tell me about some of the struggles they already have with their first one in their family. And then, of course, you haven't even hit childhood, and then you haven't even hit teenage years, and then you haven't even hit college years. There's always going to be somebody always somebody who knows more than you, who has seen more than you, who has a list of things that you should be doing as a parent in whatever stage of development the child is. And it's ongoing. Right now, as a patient, you're in the weeds, so you're seeing what's in front of you. But I guarantee you, this is an opportunity for you to establish the boundaries that you're going to need for the rest of your life. So whatever it is that you want, however it is that you want to handle your private life, and this pertains to this, it could pertain to your relationship with your partner, it could pertain to things you want to do in your career, it could pertain to how you want to raise your kids, it could pertain to everything. And it may be sort of setting limits on what your boss, your parent, your whoever wants to know, and saying things like, some of these things are private, are between my husband and I, or whoever your partner is. It's between my partner and me, and that's the way we want to keep it. I appreciate your caring, but this is going to be something that just my partner and I are gonna share. If you don't want to share it, if you want to share it, of course, all bets are off. But if you feel the need to set some limits, it's appropriate to set limits. And infertility is one of those topics that is absolutely acceptable. In fact, it is expected for people to have boundaries. People know not to ask more than is offered. Certainly men don't ask. It's mostly women who ask other women. Men keep their mouth shut and don't ask about what's going on to other men. It could be a good thing and a bad thing. And as a good thing, it gives you a place where you can share, where you can get support. And a bad thing, though, you can feel very intruded upon. And so you decide where you want to set those boundaries. And as I had mentioned before, there's no right place to draw the line. But it's whatever place feels comfortable to you, that's the place you have to draw. And this is the time to exercise that power in your life, and not to hold back. And I'll go back to, what I said before, not to feel guilty, not to feel pressured. Set those boundaries ahead of time before you have the interactions with these individuals. So when you interact with them, you're already prepared on how you want to handle that conversation.
Sounds great. I am just responding to a couple of the messages in here about the FertiliFriends group. If you are already logged into Facebook, you can just run a search for FertiliFriends. Otherwise, it's fertilifriends.com/FertiliFriends. And then other than that, I think that we're probably in a pretty good place.
Okay, well, I hope that some of what we talked about resonated with people. I hope it was familiar and helpful. Hopefully, to me, the main thing here is for people not to feel alone, for people to realize that whatever you heard me talk about, or whatever you may think about, I'm the only one who goes through, I'm the only one who's got the boss who wants to know everything, or the family member who interferes, or the other family members who are going through completely different things than mine, and I feel very isolated and alone, or I have to sit with a conversation with a family member who's upset because they're having a third child, and oh my God, why would you even want to have kids because this is so stressful. I mean, it goes on and on the things that you feel isolated and alone on. So part of what the purpose of tonight was, besides hopefully giving you some tips and some ideas, is also to remind you that there's a lot of people who are feeling the same way. So you don't have to isolate yourself completely if you feel like family or friends may not be the place where you find the most comfort. As somebody said, alluded to, there's these groups where you're going to find a lot of women who are sharing the same feelings. And I can guarantee you that everybody in this meeting tonight is having very similar feeling that you're feeling. So you're not alone. We want to help. We want to support you in any way that we can. Part of this is tell us where you're at, tell us what you need, and we'll try to be there for you in any way possible. And just don't throw in the towel. That's really my main point here. Always not to give up.